Yeah. And then let's change the bandage.
Oh, it's working now.
So we can the skin kind of it heals. And then because the skin is one tiny spot opened up, we have satisfaction.
Jessica, we are live. I can confirm from YouTube.
Oh, thank you. So I'm on antibiotics. They did 2 emergency procedures to try to correct.
Good morning. Welcome to today's school safety subcabinet meeting. It is 10 a.m. Let's call this meeting to order. Please confirm we are now live streaming.
Yes, we are live.
Don, please confirm we have a quorum.
We do have a quorum.
The last meeting of the subcabinet meeting was in May. The May meeting was recorded and that recording is available on the MCSS website. There are no May meeting minutes to be approved. Does anyone have any addition to today's agenda? I will turn it over to Kate to take us through the updates from MCSS.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chaudhry. First of all, welcome to your first subcabinet meeting. Thank you for being here. We're excited to have you. So the start of the fiscal year, July 1st, the center started our new fiscal year. We've done quite a few things. Jim's going to talk to you about our summer conference we held in July. Gifty's obviously going to go through the subcabinet applications for some of our grants today. We also started our data collection for this fiscal year. So we've begun that. We're collecting data on the number of school resource officers in each of the individual schools, public schools in the state. We're collecting data on how the emergency plans worked for our school systems last year. And then finally, we're working on our SRO training, our SRO and school security employee training. So we have more of that coming up over the next couple of months. So we're excited about that. So those are the major updates from the center, unless there's any questions specifically about any of our initiatives. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Jim, and Jim's going to provide you an update and overview of our 2021 school safety conference that we just held.
Good morning, everyone. If you don't mind, I'm going to stand. I'm driving for a couple hours this morning, so I like to stand. My name is Jim Hott. I've been with the center for about 2.5 years. Prior to that, I was an SRO and a DARE officer as a police officer in Cumberland in Allegheny County. So I'm also the conference chair. This is the 3rd year of the conference, and they have changed majorly over the 3 years that we've been here. First was the first one was a 2-day in-person conference. Then last year to 4 one-hour sessions. To this year, 4 full days of all virtual conferences. So my partner here, Jessica, who we could not have done the conference without, is going to help me with my slides. So we did have a 4-day virtual session conference, 25 sessions over those 4 days. They were very well attended. We had 3 partner messages just before lunch on those days. It was Handle with Care, which is a Maryland product. Emergency plans from the Maryland Emergency Management Agency. And we had one from ransomware from the Maryland Coordinator and Analysis Center. We also had an opening message from Governor Hogan, and thank you, Superintendent, a closing message from Superintendent Chaudhry. So I know they really enjoyed that. We also opened with a video of the Carroll County High School students choral collaboration. And basically it was students from, I think, 3 or 4 different high schools, and they were all in little squares and they all sang together. It was a very good opening for the conference. So our goal this year was resilience through change. We wanted to help our attendees discover that resilience through change. We had several speakers that were very, very good, and they provided content, their experiences, best practices, and they actually provided some takeaways for our attendees. We've had numerous people and comments asking us for the presentations, asking us for the takeaways that the speakers gave to us. So we feel it was a very good success. One thing that we approached this year was we had continuing education, which was a first for us. The MSDE provided 1 hour of CPD credit for educators. MPCTC, which is the Maryland Public Corrections Training Center, provided 14 hours of in-service training for all police officers that attended. And then we had the National Association of Social Workers who provided up to 20 hours, which was the total amount of hours we had for our conference. And we did have several, numerous people take advantage of those. So to get into the conference itself, we had 5 different keynote speakers, very good speakers. Jessie Weinberger was our first speaker. She talked about device time and mental health on our youth. She had the whole afternoon on the first day that we had. She was very knowledgeable. We had Lynn Reimer, who is a chemist from Colorado, and she spoke about trends in teen substance abuse, and probably one of our most popular sessions. We've had numerous people ask us to have her back. We had Judge Robert Lung, also from Colorado, who is an expert in child sex trafficking. And we had Mark Yarborough, who spoke to us. He's a retired state's attorney from Texas, spoke to us about burnout. And also a highly sought after speaker, Retro Bill, who is, you can't see his picture here, but he is a speaker that speaks about how to be a hero to kids and how to teach how to connect with kids in a much better way. So there were good keynote speakers that we had. Okay. We also had general sessions, and in those general sessions, our first one was Missy Jenkins Smith. She's a school shooting survivor from 1997 in Paducah, Kentucky. And she talked about resilience, and it was perfect. She led the conference off. We also had Laura Clary of the Greater Baltimore Medical Center, and she talked about child abuse during the pandemic and sexual abuse during the pandemic. We also were privileged to have 2 representatives from Baltimore County, Jim Corns and Barbara Burnoff, and they talked about the ransomware attack that they had during the pandemic, and it was also a very well-attended session. Janine Beck from Frederick County Public Schools talked about restorative practices, as well as Marianne Brittingham also talked about restorative practices. And we had our legal updates. Unfortunately, our representative, Dawn, was unable to present, but her, I believe it was her supervisor, Elliot Schoen, stepped in and presented for us for our legal updates on our general session. After that, we had some breakout sessions. We had numerous breakout sessions, and our paths were for the school safety coordinators and administrators of schools, one for school resource officers, and one for our mental health coordinators. So our first one was Katie Greer on internet safety. And we had 2 more people from the Greater Baltimore Medical Center, Evelyn Kim and Rosalind Berkowitz. Evelyn talked about forensic evaluation of evidence for police officers in schools, for SROs. And Roz talked about non-fatal strangulation. And that was headed towards the mental health group, because it helps to see the signs on students of this non-fatal strangulation, how in-depth it is and how prevalent it is that we don't really know about. One of our most well-attended ones was Jen Lin, and she focused on autism and IDD. And it was a great presentation. In fact, she presented our first conference as well. The next one, Robin Schusko, is from Frederick County Community College, and she talked about creating a school safety culture. And our last one was Tammy Ginsburg of the American Federation of Suicide Prevention. And she gave a presentation on suicide prevention. We still had more breakouts. Mr. Mike Miser from Charles County, talked about student ID badges. Tamika Perkins and Corporal Michelle Levere of the Anne Arundel County Police Department spoke on 2 different breakout sessions regarding restorative practices programs that they put into their program. We had Kristen Kinman. She is from the Archdiocese of Baltimore, and she spoke about how the non-public schools were able to reopen during COVID safely. We also had, and one of our speakers is here, Claire Cabral, Kevin Bokum, and Henry Miser of the student focus group. And they talked about school safety through the eyes of students. It was another well-attended and much requested session that we had. And our last session was Gangs in Schools, and it was conducted by an SRO in Hagerstown, Maryland, Tom Kelly. So our top 5 sessions. The first one was Marianne Brittingham, and this was how to reduce the power struggles during restorative circles. And it was a very well-attended session, the most well-attended. I actually got to argue with her as a child over the over the feed, so it was very fun, but it was very informative. The next two tied, and it was Lynn Reimer and Judge Lung about our substance abuse and human trafficking. Our third one was our school shooting survivor, Missy Jenkins Smith, and then child sexual abuse with Laura Clary, and then one of our sessions with Jesse Weinberg, device time. Our breakout sessions also were very well attended. Our top one was about internet safety, and you can see that 80 people attended that breakout session. And that was the top one for mental health. For our school safety coordinators and our admins, it was responding to gangs in schools. That was their top one. And for our SROs, it was the top one was how to work with autistic and IDD students, which is very encouraging to me because that's one of my favorite topics in helping to deal with autistic students. Okay, so we went over our evaluations, and our evaluations, the average conference rating was an 8.6, which we felt very good about. The virtual conference experience was an 8.0. And our virtual platform navigation was a 7.4. We also asked two questions. Were their knowledge and skills improved by the event? And the box, you can't see it, but it was overwhelmingly yes, 105 to 7, that their knowledge and skills were improved. And did it meet your learning objectives? And overwhelmingly yes, 107 to 5. Okay. So, to be completely honest, we wanted to put in there what people least liked and what they most liked about the conference. So we kind of figured this was going to come up, the technical difficulties during a conference like this, especially a 4-day conference all online. That was the biggest topic about what they liked least about the event. They didn't like the fact that it wasn't as interactive as it would be in person. That the sessions weren't recorded to look back later. We made a conscious decision not to do that. There were several speakers that requested not to be recorded, but we thought to ourselves in the planning, if this was an in-person conference, we would not be recording. So we decided not to record them at this time. Another one just sitting at this computer screen because I was the one that wanted the longer conference because we had so many good speakers. So we had them sitting at their desk, 7 hours a day for 4 days. It is very tough to look at a screen that long. And then we didn't get the agenda out as fast as some people would have liked. So that's something we're going to look for next year. The things they liked most about it was, and I put this at the top, not to give us kudos, but because it was there several times, the professionalism of the staff. The variety of topics and presenters was one of the big topics about what they liked the most. You can see there, they were hilarious, the range of topics, variety of speakers. Many liked that it was a virtual venue. And they said that topics were very relevant to the student needs, and they really appreciated Henry's program, hearing from the student's perspective. Okay. Some more statistics. The average attendance of each person was they attended 10 sessions. There were 40 people that attended from beginning to end everything that we provided. We had a total registration of 554. And we had 354 unique check-ins, which means that at least 354 people checked in during that time. Later on, we found out there were some that were unable to check in because they were at a school resource officer conference in Florida, or they had things come up, they had vacations, they had things come up, they weren't able to do it. We did have, which was encouraging, 66 out-of-state registrations, and I want to thank Sandy Caldwell back here because that was promoted through our tip line national call. 14 were registered from Georgia, 7 from Oklahoma, and 6 from Colorado. Okay. And the last slide I have is our partner groups. We worked with our partners across the state, DARE, the Maryland Department of Human Services, the Interdisciplinary Act. Dawn, you have to tell me with this title.
Active Assailant Interdisciplinary Work Group.
That's what I meant to say, yes. Handle with Care, the tip line, and also MEMA. So that kind of sums up the conference that we had. Is there any questions I can answer for you? Yes, sir.
It seems like with that kind of a response and people that are interested, even if it's a live conference, why wouldn't you want to record it so that people could refer back to it and share? I heard this, and point them to certain segments of it, so that they can refer to each other and see exactly what it is. It seems like it would be more valuable.
Well, there were several speakers that it was in their contract that they are national speakers and that's their livelihood. So they requested us not to record it. And it is something we will be looking at in the future to see if maybe it would be better to record things, because I'll be honest, some of our staff missed some of the things they really wanted to see because we were in other rooms and breakout rooms. So it's something we're going to look at in the future. I'm hoping that it's in person next year, or at least a hybrid option, so that we could have a little bit of interaction as well with our audience. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
We'll move on to reviewing all of the applications, and if you will walk through each one, and after each one, we'll have a discussion, and then we'll look for a motion.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So fiscal year 22, just like we did with fiscal year 21, we have $600,000 in our Safe Schools Fund budget to give out to all 24 jurisdictions. Due to the smaller budget amount compared to prior years, if you remember fiscal year 20, we had 10 million. Fiscal year 19, we had 10 million. So that changed when we started administering the School Resource Officer Grant Program in fiscal year 20. So the budget for this year again is $600,000, and we have received 7 grant applications from 7 jurisdictions out of the 24. The allocation amount for fiscal year 22, like we did in 21, is $25,000 per school. And so with that, I will start with the very first school system, Allegheny County Public School. So they are requesting for the full amount of $25,000 to cover overtime wages for their safety and security officers. Now, these officers assist with different kinds of calls. Many of the ones that they've actually received are for, so there's a difference between this grant and the SR grant that we give out, but for the Allegheny County Public School Systems, they have their own staff members who assist schools with school-based incidents inside and outside of their buildings. And the request again is for $25,000.
Any questions on this grant?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, how, and Don, please step in to correct me. Do we have some sort of a minimum requirement of how those dollars are spent? This is a reimbursement, right?
This is reimbursement. Yes.
Right. And so do we have to look to see that they're not, I don't mean to say that they are, but that somebody's working extra time just because they know a reimbursement is coming, or were there real incidents that required them to be working additional hours?
Thank you for the question. So yes, there are real incidents. We did get back with Allegheny County Public School Systems in the last school year, even with school being open for less than half of the school year. They had about 40 to 50 different incidents that they had to respond to. Aside from the incidents, they also do home visits. And so these safety and security officers do a lot of the response outside of normal school periods and also during weekends. And it's not for the sake of there being, a guaranteed funding. These are actual requests based on different things that happen during the school year.
And I think what you're asking is like, if this is all prospective, so this is not to retroactively fund for things that already happened. This would allocate the $25,000 to the school system. They would then have to submit for the overtime and submit the documentation to MCSS to get the reimbursement of it, to spend down the $25,000 if awarded.
So it's not a reimbursement?
No,
Okay.
it's a reimbursement in the sense,
Potentially.
yes.
Thank you.
Right, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Would someone like to make a motion to approve this grant? Motion. Second.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Aye. All opposed? See no one abstaining. Let's move on to the next one.
Thank you. Hopefully I do a better job with this one. So this is on Arundel County. They are requesting $24,938 to purchase about 20 cameras for Broadneck Elementary School. Now, this is part of their project to revamp their camera security technology in your schools. And this was identified during their 2019 school safety assessment evaluation. So for this particular year, they are requesting to use the funding in just one of the elementary schools to purchase the cameras. So with the cameras and the installation cost, the total request again is approximately $24,938.
Questions on this grant? I have a motion to approve.
Curiosity question. Just curiosity question. I mean, is this kind of a system? You mentioned 2019 assessment. I'm assuming that we're getting down to an elementary school that we've taken care of the higher levels of schooling. The older ages that I would assume would have more risk and need for cameras.
So in the application, they did not state any reason in terms of why they would prefer this elementary school. But in terms of what we have in our notice of funding availability announcement, we always want to encourage the schools to put their request in where they have the most need. So the assumption is that this is where they have the most need.
Any other questions or discussion? Even curiosity questions? I have a motion to approve.
Sure.
Mr. Gloria,
Encore.
second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Seeing none. Moving on.
So moving on, the next request is from Carroll County Public School Systems. They are requesting $25,000. And this funding is actually going to be used for different projects. If you look on your overview sheet, the first request is to print standard response protocol posters, about 3,000 copies of them for all of your schools. They are also looking to print posters for the Safe Schools Maryland reporting system. We affectionately call it the tip line. And so these posters will be again available in most of your school buildings. They are requesting to print 225 copies. They will also be purchasing Stop the Bleed kits. They are also interested in purchasing door numbering for their external doors, but on the inside. So they did purchase these door numberings in prior years, but one of the observations they've made from their emergency management partners is that it would be important for them to have the same door numberings on the inside of the doors, so it's consistent. And then the final request is to train 4 school nurses and additional 6 school nurses in train the trainer, CPR train the trainer courses, and also purchase some AED training kits. And again, this is for the total allocation amount of $25,000.
Discussion?
Just a question. It has to do with the inside labeling, but probably it's more important on the outside. Do you know is Braille included?
That's an excellent question. We do not, but we can definitely follow up with this.
A colleague here from the department has pointed out that if it's on the outside, probably it's used for navigation purposes, and there should be a Braille component. Obviously, on the inside as well, it might be a good idea for the students.
Any other questions? Motion to approve.
So
So motion to approve. Second. Second. Secretary Beatty, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? None. No abstentions. Moving on to the next grant.
Yes, sir. So the next request is from Cecil County. They are requesting the $25,000 allocation to purchase 46 units of radio to facilitate a more effective and widespread communication access in their buildings. They are also requesting to purchase 11 Chromebooks and 13 iPads for their Student Support Center. The Student Support Center helps students with, any behavioral issues. It allows them the opportunity to come in. There are Student Support Center technicians who are available to help the students. Now, the laptops are specifically for the support technicians. They do have to enter data based on the visit when the students do come in. The iPads are for the students. It actually has pre-downloaded apps, different apps that are able to help them in any of those common situations when they are required. And so the entire request again is for the $25,000 allocated amount.
Say a little more about the Student Support Center. It's built into the school or is it standalone?
No, so it is part of the school system. Our understanding is they have about 13 of them, and they provide multi-tiered system supports. So it has to do with neuroscience, child development theories, restorative practices. And so whenever there are any issues being experienced by the students, they're normally sent to the Student Support Center just to provide them the opportunity to calm down. But it is part of their school system.
Discussion? Motion to approve.
I'll make a motion. to approve.
Mr. Burrell, motion to approve, second. Second by Secretary Beatty. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Seeing none. Moving on.
So the next request is from Charles County Public Schools. This is a repeat request from last year. So Charles County Public Schools will purchase the BARC monitoring platform. They used this last year to pay for a contractor to perform in live or in-person monitoring. And this helps them, just ensure that there are no inappropriate content on their learning management platform, as well as their Office 365 platforms. The request is for $25,000 and the rate is at $1 per student.
Discussion?
The question is this allowed? They have to have this software already in place. I mean, so they would fund this with out of their educational budget. So I understand the need. Is this allowed, this particular use, is it allowed?
So the use itself in terms of being able to monitor, the learning platform, yes, it's allowed. What the funding is being used for is for a contractual person or a contract between Charles County Public Schools and BARC. So they have an in-person monitoring session versus, everything being done remotely. So this funding is paying for that person to actively monitor any activities that happen on their education platform.
And it was approved last fiscal year as
It
well.
was, yes.
So
The subcabinet approved it, the same grant last fiscal year.
and is it being effective? What's the story on it?
So we don't have any story in terms of how it helped them last year. But what we know is that they are continuing the contract with BARC. But we can definitely get some additional
I'd like to
information
know,
in
since
terms
they
of
did it,
effective.
well, last year was a COVID year, so probably wasn't a boom, but yeah, I would like to know, why is it more effective to have somebody in addition to the system doing I mean, I can see the concept, that way they could relay things to the security officer, but I just.
And the numbers of issues and incidents online grew because they were too numerous for one technician.
So the security officers could visit homes then whenever issues came up.
This is different. This is a contract contract with BARC. So they don't have to pull a security person full time just to do this. They contract this out with the BARC the organization, the software people. And the technician they had last year, I think because everybody was home and in front of their computer, the numbers grew to one technician couldn't handle all the incidents. Is what they told us. So,
And maybe like just a point of clarification. So when the students would log in from home in most of those school systems, they were logging in using their school-based credential, your student identification number, however your school email set up. So once you were in, it was almost like a VPN into the school system. Then whatever they're doing while they are logged in is to be akin to what would be happening if they were in the classroom or using the computing facilities at the school, because it's passing through the school server.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I understand. But I mean, but each school system has software like this anyway.
Yes.
And then they have to. And so this is in addition to it. It's additional resource. So yeah, I'd like to know what they do.
Sure.
And if it's a good, it's a legal use of the money, then maybe it frees up that funding for use in the educational system otherwise.
Well, you're saying that, and I'm thinking if it makes sense in one county, if it's working there, and it's a semi-rural county, should we be looking at this broadly as
Yeah.
opposed to
Maybe we could,
patchwork?
exactly, maybe even buy a cheaper contract, because you're buying volume. It has a purpose.
Any other comments, questions? Motion to approve.
I guess, well, my point of clarification, are you asking to receive the additional information prior to
No, I'm
approving?
not.
Okay.
I'm not.
That's all.
No, I-
But looking forward for next
Yeah, as a
fiscal year.
condition.
Gotcha.
I don't think
Okay.
we need to modify the motion. It's just staff information. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So for a future session, you would like to see some more information. Got it. Motion to approve. Motion to approve by Mr. Papier, second. Sorry. By Colonel Jones, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, moving on.
So the next school system is Frederick County Public Schools. They are requesting approximately $24,762 to purchase and install 6 cameras at 6 different Frederick County school stadiums. They will also purchase and install access equipment at all 7 county public school stadiums that were listed in the application, and of course, other installation materials. And again, the request is for $24,762. Any questions?
Discussion.
Probably makes a lot of sense to add this into an area where the public is gathering. That's just how.
One camera per stadium seems lacking. I mean, I don't know if there are ways of wiring in other actual cameras to a system without a significant cost differential, but I know nothing about that, but just for common sense, there's one camera per stadium, doesn't do a whole lot.
Did say in their application if they have cameras already installed on these, or these are the first time they're ever installing a camera?
So based on this application, they are integrating a lot of the cameras that they have on a network platform so that all of the cameras can talk to one another. So this is part of that project where they are replacing cameras that are currently there that are not part of the network platform so that they're visible to the Frederick County security employees.
So there's probably maybe multiple cameras on the site. Any other questions or comments? Motion to approve. Mr. Morrell, thank you. Second. I'll second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Seeing none.
So this is a final request for today from Montgomery County Public School Systems. So they're requesting the full $25,000 to fund school safety, security training initiatives for their school safety security staff. Now, these staff members are 10-month employees. So until the school year starts, Montgomery County public school system is not able to pay them. So this funding will allow them to bring them in a day ahead of school starting to provide about 3 to 4 hours worth of school safety training. And the expected or projected rate is about $28 per hour for each of these staff members to receive the 3 to 4 hour training that will be provided to them.
Question?
Yes, Chair.
You guys provide training, right? Is there any way that they could come here instead to receive the training and save them this expense?
They're going to have the expense regardless of who gives the training, because they're 10-month employees, security staff. The day they hit the streets, the day they hit the offices, they already have their days and weeks mapped out. This is additional training, going to bring them in for a day ahead of time. And their union contract is very tight over there. It won't let them do it unless they're being paid.
So this is for salaries.
These are for salaries, yes. So this is not for the
That's
training.
for the training to be provided for them
Yes.
to attend.
Well,
Yes, for them to attend.
although I would argue it's more like overtime, right?
Correct.
So it's not their 10-month salary, it's additional to be able to bring them in and train them during the 2 months that they're out.
They do that with teachers formally, actually pay, so not all employees have it, so I'm assuming they're like, hey, pay us to go to training. That is kind of true, not.
But it seems like they could start the next day, but it's apparently they can't because they've written it into the contract. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any discussions or questions or wonderings? Motion to approve. Secretary Beatty, second. Sorry. Jones. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Same sign. I think that
Thank you.
completes all the grants. Next, we will discuss the recommendation for MCSS to include in the annual report. Members of the public can find last year's report posted on the MCSS website. Kate, please walk us through a discussion regarding the recommendations for MCSS.
Sure. So the last page in your packet that was on the table, it was also was sent to you ahead of time. So the top section just talks about the responsibilities of the subcabinet as outlined in the statute, the Safe to Learn Act of 2018. So we are recommending under the for discussion for MCSS that the following 3 recommendations from the subcabinet be included in your annual report at the end of the year. So these are recommendations that you would be making to the center on initiatives that you want us to do over the next year. So I'm happy to answer any questions about those recommendations. The first is expanding the outreach of the Safe Schools Maryland Anonymous Reporting System. So that's obviously it's a priority of the governor's office. It was implemented in 2018. It's been very successful. Obviously, the volume's been a little low given the pandemic. So our hope is to figure out ways to better market the program so that it's known throughout the state. And just for clarification, so Safe Schools Maryland is free to every school in Maryland. Public school, private school, non-public, special education facilities, every school in the state. The second is to identify gaps in school safety preparedness, planning and training and coordination, and then develop any additional training, guidance, templates, or other resources that may be of assistance to schools throughout the state. And then the final is to identify, develop, and conduct training workshops for school safety stakeholders. That includes SROs and school security employees, not just seminar-based, but also role-playing type trainings where we can actually sit and work through scenarios with them. So those are the 3 recommendations before you for consideration and approval.
Discussion.
And question about first bullet, the Safe School Maryland,
Yes,
and you said that it was available to any school.
correct.
All school free. Do we have a list of?
Who's in it?
Yeah.
We do. Yes, so every public school in Maryland, and there's, Sandy, correct me if I'm wrong, there's approximately 350 private schools.
We have about 500 private schools.
We're up to 500. So there's 1,400, all the public schools in Maryland
Are taking advantage,
are taking advantage of it, yes.
and you can target those who haven't yet.
Yes, and we've actually been doing that. So we have been reaching out to them individually because obviously we have all the names. So we know who to reach out to, we know who's in the system and who's not. So we're able to target them individually and we've been very successful.
Just in terms of your information and background in terms of best practices, trauma informed, all of the various protocols and things building with that. Who or what entity are you working with in terms of those guidelines, those trainings? And I'm essentially offering the partnership we have with various pieces of the University of Maryland School of Medicine, School of Social Work, et cetera, in that capacity, because that's one of the areas we're working on is trying to expand what we are offering in terms of evidence-based practices, and where we can to set up multiplier systems so that we're bringing our HBCUs to be essentially getting trained as trainers so that they can go out and be the providers of that. So in any way we can piggyback on any other efforts to get more evidence-based practice models out there.
That would be
would love to do
fantastic.
that.
That would be great. So we have subject matter experts from across the state supporting our initiatives. But Mike is in the room. So Mike oversees our SRO training. So he will definitely touch base with you after this and we'll figure out how we can connect the dots if they're not already connected.
So one of the topics, it sounds like the topic of most interest was gang violence and how that we can build processes to assist the LEAs. Could we add that to this list? Because it seems like it deserves some study and development of programs specifically.
And Mr. Grohl, you mean bullet 3, added into bullet 3?
Yeah,
Okay.
The trainings.
you're in the training, which would be bullet 2. Because if there's so much interest, is there a gap in available information to support them?
Okay.
How often are we using students in our training? I mean, one of the most popular sessions was using students, so designing with them rather than doing to them. would probably make a big difference. So I'm curious how often we are intentional about that, or do we? This was kind of the first time we brought them to a conference because they're very active. and
They are.
everywhere. I mean, I have a board member who's very passionate. But I found when you work with students, they will
Yes.
sign with you because they understand.
Yeah, we've done actually quite a bit. So your new board member, Kevin, was actually on our student focus group for the first year. So we have utilized the student focus group to help us. Dawn finalized one of her trainings where we got input from the students. We've run other trainings through them. So it's sort of in the infancy stages, but we have definitely been looping them in more and more as we develop this training. And our SRO training, we were doing some videos where we're involving students in those so that, we can show the interaction between an SRO or a security employee and the students. So we're sort of expanding that as much as we can.
And the more we can do that, the more we apply it.
Yep, sure. Absolutely.
Are there any other changes or additions to the recommendation for MCSS? Can I get a motion to include the recommendations in the draft annual report? Motion by Mr. Burrell. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Senator Jones. All in favor? Aye. Aye. All opposed? Seeing none.
So the next piece is for the advisory board. So the advisory board, as you know, is to be providing you recommendations and guidance on school safety initiatives. So the first thing we are hoping the subcabinet will recommend for the advisory board is to review and revise the behavioral threat assessment policy. If you recall, that was developed in 2018, so several years ago, right after the law was implemented. The center wasn't even fully staffed. There were only 3 individuals working for the center at the time. So this is really an opportunity to dig into that policy and see if there's any additions, updates, changes that need to be made.
So the question, you've been collecting a lot of data.
Mhm.
How is that organized to, as an asset for the advisory board to look at, to see what parts of the policy are working well and where they need to shore up other parts?
Yeah, so you mean the data that we collect from the school system? So they actually have access to all of that. We've presented that data back to them on multiple occasions. So this would be an opportunity for us to sit down with them, parse out sort of, there's some legal side that needs to be worked out, right? So, so what's that piece? And then what are, from an implementation perspective, what are changes we can make to the policy that would be useful for the school systems to be able to implement?
You mentioned advertising, getting the word out. The tip line has been pretty successful. So which particular tips, for instance, have been the most valuable? And how can these guys with threat policy figure out a way to amplify that and make it more robust?
Was your question about data specific to the behavioral threat assessment policy?
Yes,
or
it
just
was.
in- Okay.
Okay.
So there isn't a statutory mandate to collect any data. So the center does not actually have any data related to the implementation of the individual school system level behavioral threat assessment policy.
All right.
So we have anecdotal information. We have conversations with the
Can we
partners on
get
things
some
that are
of the
happening.
survey, that's related to their individual policy so that we have comparable
So we can ask.
information? Okay.
We can certainly ask those questions. Again, as Tom mentioned, there's no statutory requirement that they respond, but we can certainly start those conversations.
Sure.
Do you have any anecdotal information regarding suicidality, suicidal comments, anything that's coming in through the tip line, clustering around that? I mean, we're seeing numbers going up, and you
Yes.
don't have a good sense as to, well, speculation as to why, but nothing that's, driven responses.
We do. We are seeing those numbers, and we are seeing sort of the results on the other side. So what the school systems are doing or individual schools are doing to provide supports to those students. So we've had a couple of success stories. Again, it's an anonymous system, so we can't be very specific in an open meeting about some of the data we're seeing, but we can certainly bring that to you.
I mean, any trends, any general information, anything that might be useful at this point in time. To just
Okay.
try and get a sense of what's driving us.
Yeah, we can actually do a presentation for you in November if you like. We can go through all of that and see where we are.
Mr. Chair, and one more, and I'm sorry, I was just thinking back as you were talking about Maryland, and your university and the Hunger Project that is looking to try to identify where exactly we have the highest areas of hunger within Maryland. Apparently, they've gone a long way in building these metrics. Is hunger and tied to these problems that like suicide or gang violence and that? Is there a connection? Because if it is, maybe it's a data point that the University of Maryland might want to consider, using the data from tip lines and directly from the LEAs.
Beyond hearing about what was being done during COVID in terms of school lunches and that type of stuff, I've had very little information about the Hunger Project or which part of Maryland is doing it. But Google's out there if we can find out.
And in terms of the tip line data itself, there are restrictions and there are a lot of different legal considerations as to what or how that data could be used other than in the aggregate.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So an area, you got a identified hunger area. particular incidences that we want to be concerned with, and we're late, you know, to those general aggregators. And I'm totally ignorant. I just heard this, listening to it on NPR as I was driving up, trying to think how would, I'm in the facility business, so how does it relate to me? So I was thinking from that perspective, but it relates certainly to your work.
Questions, comments, any changes or additions to the items for the advisory board?
There are other ones that you have.
Oh, I'm sorry. The second one was only sort of an expansion of what the advisory board has been tasked to do previously, and that is identifying, prioritizing if there are new regulations the subcabinet should develop, if there are additional policies and or guidelines, templates, things like that, that would be useful. Thank you.
I need a motion to approve the additions. Motion. Copier. Second. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none. Looks like we are officially done with our agenda items. Anything else anyone would like to bring up? If not, I'll connect.
I would, Kim Spivey has been a member of my designee for many of the meetings. She's retiring at the end of this month, I know. And I wanted to introduce Arabia Davis, who runs our funding program and is very connected, as you know. Whenever
Yes.
we tried to align what it was we did and what you did. So Arabia will be designee on many of the meetings if I'm not.
Oh, excellent. Great, thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Motion by Mr. Burrell, second. Second by Secretary Beatty. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Seeing none. Thank you so much. Meeting adjourned.